First Chronicles, chapter 18. So we're going to take on a kind of small chunk for a Sunday night. Only 3 chapters. But they're actually not very long chapters either. And I wanted to spend and just kind of continue on this morning and be able to spend more time in worship and prayer. And so that's why I wasn't so sure exactly how much we were going to tackle this morning when I was looking at it. So in 1 Chronicles 18, we see David's response in many ways to the Davidic covenant and being told that he can't build the temple. He's not going to be able to build the temple, but that doesn't stop him from going out and preparing for the temple and really to set up the success of his son's building project. They're going to need 2 things, money and security, both of which David's going to go out and basically take care of. And so I think even as we get into this, and I'll probably spend more time reflecting at the end of the chapter, but you find David had really a ministry. You know, this morning I wanted to try and look at it from more of a bird's eye and make it more openly applicable to all. But really, he had a specific ministry calling that he felt like I was going to be called by God to do this ministry, to build the temple. And when God says no, David decides, well, then I'm going to set up the guy who's going to do that ministry. And if I can't do it, I'm going to remove the obstacles and bring in the provisions so someone else can do this thing. And I think I even wrote down, to be willing to do the work of preparation when not permitted to undertake the principal service is proof of real devotion. It's G. Campbell Morgan. And just the idea that it really is, if you're willing to put in the time and the effort and all that, knowing that, hey, it's not going to be me, it's going to be someone else. Laying groundwork knowing it's not going to be me, but I know that future generations, this is going to matter. And so this is what we see David doing, and this is in a way looking at a spiritual overview of this chapter, but much of the chapter is kind of nuts and bolts, and we'll kind of move through and just discuss what he does. And so verse 1, after this, it came to pass that David attacked the Philistines and subdued them and took Gath and its towns from the hand of the Philistines. Verse 2, then he defeated Moab, and the Moabites became David's servants and brought tribute. Verse 3, and I guess I'll mention, the Philistines, they've been, perpetual enemies of Israel. Moab, what's interesting, if you go back to Samuel, again, 2 Samuel 8 now. 2 Samuel 8 is going to be these next couple of chapters, or really 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, will all be covered in this section of Chronicles. Samuel's got some extra details and stories that we don't have in Chronicles, and a little bit vice versa, but David ends up doing a good number on Moab. And there is some speculation and wondering as to why this is. His great-grandmother, Ruth, was a Moabitess woman. And while he was on the run from Saul, it seems as he took his family and had his family stay in Moab. So he had connections there. Some people think that maybe something happened to his family or whatever, that maybe he had an axe to grind, because it went from David seeming to have a decent relationship with them to actually, when he defeats them here in verse 2, he goes through and executes a ton of people, it talks about in Samuel. And so that's just kind of reflecting back on what we have in 2 Samuel 8. And then he moves and defeats Hadadezer, king of Zobah, as far as Hamath, as he went to establish his power by the river Euphrates. David took from him 1,000 chariots, 7,000 horsemen, 20,000 foot soldiers, and David hamstrung all the chariot horses, except for he spared enough of them for 100 chariots. So we see David moving now against Hadadezer. He ends up hamstringing the horses, which, I don't know, it sounds kind of weird or cruel, whatnot, but the idea basically is David was told, not to multiply horses. There's horses, gold, wives. I think David just thought he was adding wives since he kept it down, in the lower double digits, right? Unlike his son. But, and in gold, he would give away so much. In fact, I didn't look it up. It was one thing I thought about, is these gathering all these materials for the temple. When you look up the modern equivalent of how many thousands of pounds of David's personal gold he donates to the temple, I mean, it's insane. I mean, I don't think, it's one of those ones where the math would just be boggling to try and calculate what it'd be worth in today's money. But horses too. Some trust in horses and other in chariots, but we will trust in the Lord. And so he wasn't trying to build a big horse army, but the idea is that when you gather all these enemies' horses, you also can't just let them loose to where the enemy's going to get them again. So essentially, it's disabling them. And you'd see that in war, actually, where you disable enemy things or even things that are your own. People will retreat and burn in their own bridges and destroy their own infrastructure. So that's kind of what's going on there. But he goes up, and now he's attacking the Syrians. And so when the Syrians, verse 5 of Damascus, came to help Hadadezer, king of Zobah, David killed 22,000 of the Syrians. David put garrisons in Syria, Damascus, and the Syrians became David's servants and brought tribute. So the Lord preserved David wherever he went. David took the shields of gold that were on the servants of Hadadezer and brought them to Jerusalem. Also from Tibhath and from Chun, cities of Hadadezer, David brought a large amount of bronze, with which Solomon made the bronze sea, the pillars, and the articles of bronze. So this is what we were saying. He's doing two things. He's defeating all their enemies, and he's gathering up the provisions that are going to be used to build the temple. If you were, again, a note taker and you're just, it's maybe if you don't know your geography all that well. In fact, I'll just put this picture up. I was going to save it for a little later. But as we see up there, we've got the expansion under David. And so the red would have been when David came into power, and that orange is after David. I mean, he over doubles the size of the territory. And I didn't make this picture. Really, it says, actually, they say under Solomon, it goes up into that yellow area, but it actually says in verse 3 that he went to establish his power by the river Euphrates. So to me, it says, actually, I think David made it all the way up to Euphrates as far as establishing who was in control of this area. So David expanded. So the Philistines, they were off to the west. In fact, that little section right there that isn't red or orange, that's still kind of Philistine territory. He pushed them down just those last couple cities. Moab is to the east. So that's the area over to the right and to the south, or actually no, to the right and a little bit to the north, sorry. Syrians, they're to the north. So he goes Philistines to the west, Moabites to the east, Syrians to the north, and eventually he actually will be going down to the kingdom of Edom, which is from the Dead Sea down, so south and east. So he's going to go north, south, east, and west, expanding every direction. It says in verse 9, now when King of Hamath heard that David defeated all the army of Hadadezer, king of Zobah, he sent Hadoram, his son, to King David to greet him and bless him because he had fought against Hadadezer and defeated him, for Hadadezer had been at war with two. And Hadoram brought with him all kinds of articles of gold, silver, and bronze. King David also dedicated these to the Lord, along with the silver and gold he brought from all these nations, from Edom, Moab, the people of Ammon, and from the Philistines, and from Amalek. Moreover, Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, killed 18,000 Edomites in the valley of Salt, so there's the south, and he put garrisons in Edom, and all the Edomites became David's servants, and the Lord preserved David wherever he went. So again, David knows he can't do this himself. I'm not going to build this temple, but nothing's going to stop me from preparing everything for the temple. In fact, Solomon's going to get plans for the temple from David. He's going to have the cedar from David. He's going to have the gold, the silver, the bronze from David. He's going to have a nation at peace with all its neighbors because of David. And it's just a good reminder for all of us that there are definitely frontliners, people who are doing the action or they're doing the job, but there's so much opportunity for people to make that job happen. We were just talking at men's breakfast a little bit, reminiscing on when we removed all the pews from the church. We had 2 pulpits, stationary fixed up here. We ripped them down and expanded the stage forward, did all this work. And while there were some people ripping out the stage, ripping out, carrying heavy pews outside, we had other people who were just watching the kids, because all of these men happen to have kids, or many of them, who needed to be watched. We had people downstairs who were preparing food. And there was just food and drinks being brought up to the guys who were working. And the idea was, there were the frontliners, You have Anthony with his master design for a stage as he's trying to do that part. And you have the muscle that's out there doing all the moving. But it was like, I can't lift a pew when I'm chasing a toddler. Probably would have been Jubilee back then. Baby Jubilee. But it was a lot of work, and it took all this team. And you see David, he knows, like, well, I'm not going to be the one to build it, but I'm going to do everything I can to support the work. I'm going to support the work of God. And I think it's something that all of us need to remember is that we are called to support the work of God and do whatever it is we can bring to get the work done. And maybe you aren't a this, but you're a that. And again, if David hadn't have done this, I don't know what Solomon would have accomplished. And then it's worth knowing that David didn't do it alone. The last 4 verses of the chapter. So David reigned over all Israel and administered judgment and justice to all his people. Joab the son of Zeruiah was over the army. Jehoshaphat the son of Ahilud was recorder. Zadok the son of Ahitub and Abimelech the son of Abiathar were the priests. Shabsah was the scribe. Banaya the son of Jehoiada was over the Cherethites and the Pelethites. And David's sons were chief ministers at the king's side. Something about David's administration that at least we have no record of in Saul's lack of administration was David surrounded himself with talented people. He surrounded himself with different people who could accomplish different tasks and get stuff done. And I think, again, it's a key. David was a great man. David had a lot going for him, but he couldn't do it on his own. And so he has Joab over his army. And we're going to see coming up here, Joab would go fight without David. Because you're the fighter, Joab. You go lead the armies. I'll come out. I'm the king. But Joab knew how to lead an army. And Jehoshaphat was a recorder. And aren't you happy that these things got written down? I mean, for what it's worth, we have someone here. He's the chief secretary. And he's the one who made sure all this stuff was recorded and things got done. We have the 2 priests. And it's just as a reminder, if you weren't here last week or whatnot, when David brought the ark up from Kirjath Jearim to Jerusalem, Shiloh is where the tabernacle originally was, the full tabernacle, ark and all. When the Philistines came and stole the ark, that's when Eli felt over dead, his sons, were killed and whatnot. We don't have record of when, but more than likely the tabernacle probably got destroyed or damaged horribly in that process. Ark was stolen, and next thing we know, we hear that the tabernacle is moved to Gibeon. So the tabernacle's at Gibeon, everything minus the ark. We've got 1 priest there, Zadok. Abiathar is down at the other tent, in which is tabernacles, kind of synonymous wording, but it's not the tabernacle, down at Jerusalem with the ark. So we got 1 priest there and 1 priest there. That's why we have 2 priests in this scenario. Shabsah was a scribe, one of my favorites of all the mighty men. Verse 17, Banaya the son of Jehoiada. And I love this guy because, again, it wasn't just that he was a mighty man who did these amazing deeds. He was also a priest and the son of a mighty priest. And so he has this spiritual side to him, and he was also faithful. And as we move forward and Adonijah tries to take the throne, we'll find that Joab goes with Adonijah. And Banaya stays faithful to Solomon and ends up taking Joab's position. And Banaya becomes the head over all the armies of Solomon. Cherethites and the Pelethites. You can go read anywhere you want. No one knows exactly who these guys are. There's a lot of assumptions and speculation. Some people think the Cherethites may have come from Crete, which would then kind of make them even maybe distant relatives of the Philistines. But what we do know is they're not Jews. They're not Israelites. And so it's like a mercenary force. And they are kind of David's bodyguards. They're like an inner circle. We don't have many details, but sometimes they think that they would have this mercenary force and probably elite soldiers at that. You're not going to hire, flimsy guys. They would be some of David's more inner circle guards and whatnot. And part of the reason was because they're outsiders, there's no temptation for some kind of, they're a Jew who wants to come up and set their own dynasty up. They're not really an Israelite. They don't really care necessarily about the things of Israel. We're here to be hired men and be loyal. And so they were loyal men. So they're like the special forces, you might say. But it's Benaiah was in charge of this special forces group. So again, surrounding yourself with men with different skills They weren't all soldiers. There was a scribe. There was a recorder. There were people doing different things. But when God's work is getting done, there's a need, right? This is all gifts of the Spirit and the body of Christ stuff. There's all these different callings, all these different people with all these different gifts, and when they come together, the combined effort is amazing what can be done. But when all you have is a David, great leader, that's great, but if you don't have the things that are there to surround, you're not going to see what get accomplished, what could. And so chapter 19, it says, now after this happened, it's going to go more about the Ammonites and the Syrians. It happened after this that Nahash, the king of the people of Ammon, died, and his son reigned in his place. And David said, I will show kindness to Hanun, the son of Nahash, because his father showed kindness to me. So David sent messengers to comfort him concerning his father. And David's servants came to Hanun in the land of the people of Ammon to comfort him. Verse 3, and the princes of the people of Ammon said to Hanun, do you think that David really honors your father because he has sent comforters to you? Did his servants not come to you to search and to overthrow and spy out the land? Therefore Hanun took David's servants, shaved them, cut off their garments in the middle at their buttocks, and sent them away. Then some went and told David about the men, and he sent to meet them because the men were greatly ashamed. And the king said, wait at Jericho until your beards have grown, and then return. So most of this reads pretty straightforward. The good king that knew David and helped him died. His son comes in. David just wants to send a group of emissaries to say nice things. But that guy's helpers and advisors are saying, no, they're spies. So they cut off the beards. And now you imagine, they wear robes, right? You got one big robe. So it's cutting off the robe at the middle, which is obviously exposing everything down below. And they send them off this way. Now walk home. I'm sure they're taking their shirts off and trying to wrap up their clothes in new different ways to have some modesty and decency. And even if they could take their upper half off and maybe cover their lower parts, they still didn't have the beard. And that might not seem like a big thing, but back then, they grew their beards out. And it was kind of what they did. It was just a normal thing. All the Jews had these big beards. And to have their beards cut off, it was a sign of disgrace, which is why David even says, you know what? Just come back after they grow. David could have maybe paraded the beardless men. Look what Ammon did. We're going to go get them. I mean, it's saying he could have used it like a propaganda thing. But no, you guys go until you feel well enough to come back, and we'll take care of this. And so verse 6, when the people of Ammon saw that they had made themselves repulsive to David, Hanun and the people of Ammon sent 1,000 talents of silver to hire themselves chariots and horsemen from Mesopotamia, from Syria, Mach, and from Zobah. And they hired for themselves 32,000 chariots. The king of Mach and his people who came and encamped before Medeba. Also the people of Ammon gathered together from their cities and came to battle. Now when David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the army of the mighty men. Then the people of Ammon came out and put themselves in battle array before the gate of the city. And the kings who had come were by themselves in the field. So here we go. We have David sends out his troops. Joab is leading the army. He's got all the mighty men, including the full army, I'm assuming. It's not just the mighty men. And they're going. And so now these mercenaries that have just been hired, they start marching there as well. So you got two groups coming. There's the Ammonites in the city, the Israelites coming, and then this hired group of Syrians also coming. Verse 10, when Joab saw that the battle line was against him before and behind, he chose some of Israel's best and put them in battle array against the Syrians. And the rest of the people he put under the command of Abishai, his brother, and they set themselves in battle array against the people of Ammon. Then he said, if the Syrians are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the people of Ammon are too strong for you, then I will help you. Be of good courage, and let us be strong for our people and for the cities of our God, and may the Lord do what is good in his sight. So Joab and the people who were with him drew near for the battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. And when the people of Ammon saw that the Syrians were fleeing, they also fled before Abishai his brother and entered the city. So Joab went to Jerusalem. They split forces. They see they're surrounded, right? So they get Abishai is going towards the city. Joab is going against the Syrian hirees, mercenaries that are in the field. But really focus in on verses 12 and 13. This is, I think, where God has got the message for us, and these things are written for our examples. First, he says, if the Syrians are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the people of Ammon are too strong for you, then I will help you. Seems like a pretty straightforward plan, right? I mean, if I'm losing, you come help. If you're losing, I'll come help you. But the catch with all of this is in the midst of battle, there's a lot going on. Personally, I've actually never been in a mighty sword and axe battle. I don't know about you guys, but I can only assume from watching Lord of the Rings that there's a lot of things happening, right? I mean, there's arrows, there's swords, it's in the middle of a war. And so truthfully, you need to be diligently paying attention. I mean, there's no way. I mean, I'm killing guys, they're trying to kill me, but I also am supposed to be watching these people back over here to find out if they're like getting more killed, right? I mean, that's the idea. In the midst of battle, I have to be diligently attentive to the status of my brothers in order to come to their aid, because even though I'm fighting a battle, it's not like I'm not doing anything over here, right? But I need to be ready to go help them if they start becoming weak. You know, James 5:16 says, confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. Probably one of the more important verses in the New Testament concerning prayer. And the first half is just as powerful as the second half. But here, this is part of this idea of the battle going on. Honestly, it's truthful, right? You've got battles you're fighting. Anyone here not busy? I mean, it's like, I'm just bored all day, Pastor. I got nothing. No, I mean, most people I know these days, we're all busy. We have struggles, we have things going on. And so honestly, if they're having trouble back there in the battle, what would be really helpful would be like, help. That would be useful to me. But if we don't confess our trespasses, our needs and our wants. See, I mean, a trespass is a sin. But remember, a trespass can be unintentional. It's not like I did this on purpose. It's any time I've crossed the line. And I'm adding to the text, and I'm admitting it. That way it's not going to get me, hopefully, in too much trouble with the big guy upstairs. But I do believe that not just trespasses, but truly any prayer need. I think it does well biblically to just say, confess anything you need. Whether it is a trespass and you need prayer for restoration, or whether it is just something else that maybe isn't a trespass. But if I don't pray, then I'm not getting healed. If I don't have that prayer going on with myself and with my brothers and sisters, well, then I'm not getting healed. And the praying's not happening if I'm not confessing, making it known that there's a need. Because the effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much, the second half of the verse. But until someone starts saying, we need help over here, then there's no praying taking place. And then there's no healing taking place. This idea of helping each other, right? You watch, and if they're coming, you help me. I'm going to actually skip that right there. It's Galatians 6:2, right? Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. This is what we're called to do. To help each other, not just in prayer, but even literally. And I know you're all busy, and you all know I'm busy. But at some point, when people just like, you know what? We need help. And for us to have open ears and hear it when people in the church are just like, listen, we need help this week with our family. There's stuff going on, and we just need help. And I'm going on this crazy un-American limb of confessing that I need help so that we can help each other. Later on in chapter 6 of Galatians, right? Let us not grow weary while doing good. That's the idea. Do you believe me? You might grow weary if you commit to doing good. I mean, it's a warning, right? For a reason. It's because there's an expectation that if you commit to helping each other, you could grow weary doing it. I'm sure none of you ever are reluctant to help people out of fear you might get tired or weary. That's the thing is, man, taking time out of my day to help. But you know what? In due season you shall reap if you don't lose heart. You're never going to serve your brothers and sisters and not be rewarded for it. Might not be in this life, but you will be rewarded. And God's not going to be a debtor to no man. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let's do good to all, right? But especially to those of the household of faith. That's the idea. That truly helping each other in the church is one of our number one callings. Yeah, we should help go out and do things that maybe show the love of Jesus to the lost. But when we show the love of Jesus to each other, the lost see that too. And they see how they take care of their own in the church. In verse 13, taking things one verse further, it says, be of good courage, let us be strong for our people and for the cities of our God. I like the Septuagint, right? The Greek Old Testament. The first word here, be of good courage, or it's Hebrew and Greek, it's one word. But in the Greek, they use that word, andrizomai. We had a sermon on that not too long ago, right? 1 Corinthians 16:13. Which is way better worded in the Old King James, right? Watch ye, stand fast in the faith, and drizomai, quit you like men. Be strong. I love that word. And that's a good definition. Quit you like men. That just sounds cool. I don't know. Do all the men agree with me? That sounds cool, right? Quit you like men. I mean, I can hear Ken Graves in the back of my head, Just be a man. But that's the thing, is that's what the word means in the Greek. It literally just means show manly traits. Look like a man. Ladies, I don't know if you relate, but the point is, though, is it's translated be strong. It's translated, be strengthened. And the idea, though, is that people need to see a strong person. Obviously, in the context of men here, and I'm sure we can just take it, just like in most cases, where men and women, being a strong man of God, be a strong woman of God. This is what he says to him here in verse 13. It says, be of good courage, a.k.a. be a man, and let us be strong also. So it's actually two different ways of saying it. Why? It's for our people and for the cities of our God, and may the Lord do what is good in his sight. You see, it's this idea that we want the people to see us being strong. We want the people to see us being courageous. It might be G. Campbell Morgan again. I can't remember where I read it, but someone just made the point that being courageous isn't a trait, it's a choice. To be a man, be a woman, be tough. It's not a trait, it's a choice. The enemy's out there. We're going to get weary fighting. It's going to be tough. But you know what? Abishai, brother, today, you and I, we need to be strong because the people need to see us strong. And when they see us strong, they'll keep fighting. But if they see us slacking or us afraid, well, yeah, they're going to follow suit. Your kids are going to watch you. Other people are going to watch you. If people think of you as a spiritual Christian, if they think of you, and I'm talking about maybe, like people at work, people family. If you're the religious one in the family, you're the one they're watching when the heat gets up. You're the one they're watching to see how you respond and how you act. And so in the day and age we live, we need to be strong. We need to be of good courage. We need to play the men for our people. And that's what I like, is it's for our people and for the cities of our God. That's why we're doing it. I'm going to be strong on behalf of all the people so they have something to look at and something to go after. And so this is what we see with Joab and Abishai. It's this, we need to do this so that people have an example that they can follow. Verse 16. Now when the Syrians saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they sent messengers and brought the Syrians who were beyond the river, and Shophach, the commander of Hadadezer's army, went before them. When it was told David, he gathered all Israel, crossed over the Jordan, came up upon them, and set up a battle array against them. So when David had set up the battle array against the Syrians, they fought with him. Then the Syrians fled before Israel, and David killed 7,000 charioteers, 40,000 foot soldiers of the Syrians, and killed Shophach, the commander of the army. And when the servants of Hadadezer saw that they were defeated by Israel, They made peace with David and became his servants. So the Syrians were not willing to help the people of Ammon anymore. Once again, wouldn't it be great to just show the enemy they're defeated and they would just give up? Because they see a united front. They see people standing strong and fighting for what they know is right. Now, the Syrians are not going to help the people of Ammon anymore, but the people of Ammon were not yet defeated. There was still another battle that had to take place. And Chronicles gives us the short version. Chapter 20, verse 1, it says, "And it happened in the spring of the year, at the time kings go out to battle, that Joab led out the army of the forces and ravaged the country of the people of Ammon, and came and besieged Rabbah. But David stayed at Jerusalem, and Joab defeated Rabbah and overthrew it." Now, most of us should know there's a whole lot left out of that story. Almost 2 chapters of 2 Samuel, chapters 12 and 13, or 11 and 12, are left out because it's David and Bathsheba. The chronicler, he had no reason to mention that story. He leaves out lots of stuff, but he adds a lot of stuff. Some people think he's trying not to make David look bad, but he mentions other things, I think, that make David look bad or, aren't great things to mention. But he's really staying focused on what he needs to focus on. But let's just reflect on that story that we should be very familiar with. It's springtime because no one likes to go to war in the mud, right? So you don't go to war in the winter. You wait till the weather gets nice. You're like, the birds, the blossoms, grab my sword, off we go. And they head out to war. But David stayed at Jerusalem. And remember, this is the time of year when the kings go out to battle. And of course, David is there, and he's at the palace, and he's on the roof, and he looks down, and he sees Bathsheba bathing on her rooftop. Next thing you know, they commit adultery. She becomes pregnant. David tries his best to cover it up, brings her husband back, Uriah the Hittite, tries to get him to sleep with her, figuring, I'll make him think it's his baby. That doesn't work, so David kills him. And then he moves on with life until Nathan the prophet comes and confronts him. They end up losing that baby, but she becomes one of his wives, and Solomon ends up coming through Bathsheba. But it's worth noting and remembering. One is that I don't think this was an accident really on either party's part. Uriah was one of the mighty men. That's why he was out to battle with Joab. He was one of the 30. Bathsheba's dad was one of the mighty men. Bathsheba's grandpa was one of David's top counselors, advisors. So you have to assume David knows Bathsheba, right? I mean, when one of your number one soldiers, your advisor's granddaughter, he knows her, and he's probably known her for a long time. And it's one of those things where this whole thing happens. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because, we've got a recording of that 2 Samuel message where we could go in depth on this. But hey, a couple quick things. David belonged in battle. And Christian, if you pull yourself out of the battle, don't be shocked when you get caught up doing stupid stuff and wasting your time and even falling into sin, because it's safer for you in the battle than it is at home. Isn't that ironic? It'd be safer for you to go out to war than to stay at home with nothing to do. The curse from the Garden of Eden. Cursed is the ground for your sake, Adam. I think there's really something to that I'm cursing the ground, Adam, and it's for your sake, because it's going to keep you busy and it's going to keep you out of trouble. Idleness is one of Satan's favorite open doors. When you have nothing to do, it's very often he will find you something to do. And he has so many great ideas, and he will toss them all out at you. Which is why you're best off in the battle. Showing up to the places you don't need to show up, doing the things you need to do, having a job, going to work, going to church, going to other opportunities, and just staying plugged in with fellowship, going out and sharing the gospel. I mean, these are all great ways to stay out of trouble. For what it's worth, too, by this point, David is over the age of 50. So it's not like, oh, well, one day this is going to wear off and I won't have temptation anymore. Well, no. I think David kind of proves the point that, Satan's always ready to open the door, and maybe we think we've made it far enough. We've made it to the end of life, without stumbling. And it's like, nope, you keep your guard up until the very end. I know Billy Graham always talked about praying for God's protection because he knew that any day was a potential to be the day that he did a single act that would render countless years of faithful service just gone. Billy knew I could slip up one time and that would make it all go away. And some of you might think, it wouldn't all go, but in many ways it does. Once a pastor falls, once a man like that falls, people, the unbelievers, the scoffers, it's done. They kind of disregard everything he says. But David stayed back, and Joab went out, and Joab defeated Rabbah and overthrew it. Now, as we read in 2 Samuel, and I will say, I think 2 Samuel chronologically is a little bit out of order because I think they try and get the entire David and Bathsheba story. They talk about the event, but they actually take you all the way to the baby being born, the baby dying, and then it even takes you to mentioning Solomon being born. So I think they're just kind of wrapping up, explaining that story, and then they jump back because during this time when Joab's at battle, David pulls Uriah from that battle. He sends Uriah back to that battle. Joab has Uriah killed at that battle. And so this is all during one season of war, right? It's all during a one-year period. So more than likely, these events take place in the middle. And I'm going to tie this in for a reason. You see, Joab does call David to come for the victory. I don't want the victory for myself. David, you come out here. We get this from 2 Samuel 12. You come out here and you get the victory. So I've got them ready, but you come out here and knock them down. So David goes out there and they have this victory. And it says in verse 2, David took the king's crown for his head, found it to weigh a talent of gold, and there were precious stones in it, and it was set on David's head, and also he brought out the spoil of the city in great abundance. Now, I don't want to get sidetracked with this, but it's just kind of a fun little extra nugget. So, a crown that weighs a talent of gold. Now, here's the other crazy part. There was actually a pre-exile and a post-exile talent. Whenever we talk in the New Testament, we're always talking post-exile talent, 75 pounds. The pre-exile talent was about 90 pounds. Just throwing that out there. I was going to grab 2 of my 45-pound plates and see if anyone could balance it on their head, because that's 90 pounds. Now, here's the funny thing is, what on earth do you have a 90-pound crown for? Other than maybe for show. They say they put it on David's head. They were taking selfies, right? Big old crown. They're just like, whoa, him and Joab, and they're like, doing that kind of a thing. But here's just a cool thing. Some believe that crown is somewhat of like a ceremonial trophy crown, and possibly, again, we don't know, but possibly it was the crown of Og of Bashan. And Deuteronomy 3:11 tells us, for only Og of Bashan remained in the remnant of the giants, and indeed his bedstand was an iron bedstand. Is it not in Rabbah of the people of Ammon? 9 cubits in its length, 4 cubits in its width, according to the standard cubit. So Og of Bashan, we know his bedstand made it to this city that David just conquered. So some say, there's a good chance maybe his crown made it that way too. A 90-pound crown could maybe fit a giant. That bed is 13 and a half feet long. It's just some interesting stuff. But he was one of those last giant people who were living in the land. You hear Og mentioned actually a handful of times throughout the Old Testament. But anyway, 90-pound, big old golden crown, just kind of fascinating. And then it says in verse 3, he brought out the people to them who were in it and put them to work with axes, with iron picks, with saws, with iron picks, with axes. So David did all the cities of the people of Ammon, and then David and all the people returned to Jerusalem. I almost was just going to have Susan read her Bible, because I forgot actually to copy this down, but I'm just going to pull it up myself. Verse 3, reading out of the King James Bible, and he brought out the people that were in it and cut them with saws, with harrows of iron, and with axes. What's fascinating is Josephus interprets it this way. The Septuagint interprets it this way. And many Bibles do interpret this, not that he made them go work with saws and iron picks and axes, but that he actually cut them with these things. In 2 Samuel, it adds to that. It actually talks about dragging the threshing cart over them, that they would normally drag over stuff to crush all the grain, then they could toss it and then get all the wheat out, right? And it mentions putting them into the furnace. Kind of gruesome, huh? Many scholars say, well, that doesn't sound like David. That just doesn't sound like David. David would never do that. And the truth is that the wording in the Hebrew is ambiguous enough you can kind of translate it both ways. The Septuagint writers, Josephus, some of the old rabbis, they lean towards David like brutally massacred these people with these weird things. What's up with that? Well, this is where I told you guys, I think the timeline's a little off in 2 Samuel. I think they finish all the David and Bathsheba stuff, then return here. I think this better fits. This event is taking place post-adultery, pre-Nathan. I honestly think David has committed these wicked sins. He's killed Uriah, and I don't think he's been called out on his sin yet. And I think he's showing up there with a real issue with his heart. And I don't know about you guys, but I have witnessed more than one time people who have sin in their life who are vicious to other people who have similar sin in their life. There's just something about the guilt or something, I don't know, where they're just horrifically cruel in the way they think people need to be treated. And you find out that they've got their own issues and somehow it's manifesting in this just unmerciful attitude towards others. And so I can't guarantee you without a shadow of a doubt, but to me, that's where things line up. If the most common ancient translation is correct, I think that timeline adds up and might explain a little bit to why David was being so crazy. Now, for what it's worth, too, these Ammonites, they put their own children through the fires of Molech, right? So if David puts them in the oven, I mean, there could have been David thinking now I'm going to set things right and get some justice in here. I want justice. I want justice. Well, he stole the lamb of the poor man. Justice! David, you are the man. Mercy. And it's always a good reminder, that we are all guilty of quite a lot of sin. And even if some of it's in our past, it's kind of like just saying, well, I've been forgiven of the murder. Yeah, but, we've got some tainted past. And just remembering where we've come from and letting that affect the way we treat others and let that affect the way that we minister to others. Last few verses, guys. Verse 4, it happened afterward that war broke out in Gazer with the Philistines, at which time Shibbekai, the Hushathite, killed Sippai, who was one of the sons of the giant, and they were subdued. Again, there was war with the Philistines, and then Hanan, the son of Jair, killed Lami, the brother of Goliath the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. Yet again, there was war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature with 24 fingers and toes, 6 on each hand and 6 on each foot, and he was also born to the giant. So when he defied Israel, Johanan, the son of Shimei, David's brother, killed him. These were born to the giant in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. They note between here and Samuel, we find that there was Goliath, and there was 4 brothers, and they were all giants. There was 5 of them. Was that why David grabbed 5 stones out of the brook? We don't know necessarily, but that's a great hypothesis for sure. 5 giants, 5 stones. Sounds pretty good to me. What do you do when you're named Lammy, but you're a giant? Hey, I got this guy's name's Lammy. Well, let's go see Lammy. And you go look up, and Lammy's 9'6". Oh, hey, Lammy. Hi. Here's the catch, though, to kind of close. There's some good stuff in all these chapters. It's fun how, each chapter is at least a couple good nuggets to walk away with and be really just chew on. And, these men who fought with David, they were giant killers. That's what they did. They fought wars. They fought battles. They did hard things. I'm teaching that to my son. You have permission to teach it to yours. Dad, why are we doing this? Because men do hard things, Judah. That's what we do. We do hard things. We take on hard tasks. And that's what men do. So get used to it. And haul that wood. No, but that's what we talk about. Men do hard things. That's why God made us. Women wonder why men can be so emotionless at times. Because he made us to do really hard things. And sometimes we'd have to turn those emotions off to be able to bear the burdens that he's laid upon us. It can be used for evil. You can have a bum who has no emotions. But I'm just saying, it's true. God made us the way we are for a reason. It's to do hard things, to take on hard tasks. And yeah, might be tiring, and yeah, it might be hard. But if we don't grow weary, we're going to reap one day in his kingdom for all the hard work we have done. I was listening to a veteran old pastor, and he was just talking about some of the men on his staff, and it reminded me even a little bit of Kyle and I, because he was saying, oh, Jerry here. He's like, Jerry and I have been serving in this church for over 30 years. He goes, I don't know if I've ever been to Jerry's house for dinner, but we've killed a lot of giants together. And he goes, we're friends. But he goes, but more than that, we're comrades. More than our friendship, more than, do we go out and hang? Do we talk? Do we text? He goes, we're just two men who are committed to going out and fighting battles together. That's what we do. And I just remember Kyle, we used to joke about how outside of our work and stuff, we knew each other for years and years and years before we ever did anything actually once outside of what we did. But we were committed to what we did, and we still don't do very much together outside of church. But he's one of my closest friends, right? But you know what? There's a lot of work to get done, and we both know that. And that's one of those things is you got to make time for friends. I'm not going to, let's not put aside establishing friendships and working on those type of things, communication, et cetera, et cetera. But also then a mentality that I'm here to fight. I'm here to work. I'm here to serve the Lord. I'm here to grow. I'm here to kill giants. I'm here to wage war. And it's going to be hard. And there's obviously going to be the opportunity and temptation to grow weary. But I know what I'm fighting for. I know why I'm fighting for it. And I know what's at stake. And so thus, we fight. And so, fun stuff looking at David and his mighty men. And again, as Paul says to the Corinthians, all these things were written for our examples. They were written to us into the age of come, right? That's the idea. It's written to us so that we can take these things and be inspired by them. And one day you can meet David and you can ask him all sorts of questions. But until then, let's wage war tonight, but in prayer and in worship. And while you sing, pray those words out. Pray that God does a work in your heart, in the heart of your loved ones, and that God moves among us. Let's pray, church.